Kirsteen Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned that one of the key areas of focus will be local energy, and I'm aware of the local power plans. I was just wondering if you could tell me how they fit in with that focus in the strategic plan, when we can expect to see them, and the benefits that you expect them to deliver to local communities.
So the local power plan is a joint DESNES and GBE document which will be published early in the new year. And one of the things I can if I can characterise it, there is an element of catalytic action that needs to be taken, which is either government policy related. So there are some regulatory measures which will be investigated. There are some policy related aspects which are more in the responsibility of the department. But there are also other catalytic measures that need to be taken, like, for example, growing the capacity and capability within the sector. So for developing clean energy projects is not easy for the average community. So having people available who can provide knowledge, expertise, toolkits, contract forms, trying to simplify the process of development. That catalytic action is going to be one part of it. The other part will be very much our long-term GB Energy business model, and we see an opportunity to use our role to bring scale to community energy. One of the challenges in the sector is that projects are different wherever you go in the country, and that makes technology more expensive. It means that private capital is less likely to flow in. So we're going to look at building a model where we enable standardisation, or maybe better, a simplification and modularity to community energy projects, and then financial products which give people access to being able to raise finance for projects. So those two elements will be detailed in the plan. As I say, we envisage that will be published in the new year.
So just to follow on from that briefly, part of it will be around building capacity within local communities, yes, from what you said. Yeah. And does that mean that there will be some engagement, for example, with local climate action networks that are already established in the country? Absolutely.
Absolutely. I mean, we're already doing a considerable amount of engagement with the likes of Community Energy England. We've been speaking to various different community energy groups. And we'll continue to do that and consult with people as we develop the strategy, and crucially as we implement it, because I think it's one thing developing the strategy, but I think it will develop and iterate over time as we learn lessons from projects and continuously improve. So.
Supplementary from Kirsteen Sullivan.
So you've been very clear about the expertise that exists around Glasgow and Edinburgh areas, but do you envisage job opportunities potentially arising across the central belt from supply chains, which could potentially support the skilled workforce in and around the industrial cluster at Grangemouth?
Well, absolutely. I mean, in a couple of weeks' time, I'm going to visit a company in Bathgate who are making flow batteries, which are really innovative, long-duration storage technology. There are many examples, and I talked before about innovation, particularly in the Central Belt and around Glasgow, but I think there are a huge amount of opportunities across the whole of Scotland, frankly, because of the legacy technologies that exist and the legacy skills that exist. And frankly, there's this language sometimes that Scotland is the UK's battery. We have so much of the renewable energy resource is in Scotland. So much of the innovation and academic thinking and thought leadership is coming from Scotland. So I think there are great opportunities across the supply chain, across the service sector, across the digital sector to be exploited, and we're going to be focused on that.
Sullivan.
Thank you. This committee's report on the future of Scotland's oil and gas industry concluded that clean energy jobs are not being created at the scale or pace required to keep up with the decline of the oil and gas industry. Is that something you recognise?
Sorry, could you repeat the question? Sorry.
So the scale, our committee's report into the future of Scotland's oil and gas industry concluded that the loss of jobs in oil and gas isn't being matched by the new jobs coming online. Do you agree with that? Do you recognise that situation?
I thought the summary of I thought the report was very comprehensive in its findings. I think there's probably more nuance to that question. I think there are I think these clearly very concentrated impacts of the energy transition, which are happening in real time, and you pointed to the impact close to your constituency, and I think the growth in clean energy jobs is not necessarily as visible because of some of these sort of big concentrated investments, like I was referring to before, like wind turbine factories or foundation factories or big port investments. But there are about 50,000 people working in offshore wind in the UK. About that, it's expected to double by 2030 if the sector develops in line with the government's targets. But it's certainly, I think, a very common theme and very important topic to acknowledge that as jobs drop off, we need to make sure that there's a clear plan that we will lean into to ensure that jobs are created to offset that impact. And
so these job losses are not new. We know that the decline has been happening over many years, with approximately 75,000 jobs lost between 2016 to 2024. But can you tell me what Great British Energy is going to do to address this employment gap now?
I mean, I reiterate the previous point. It's about investing in projects to drive activity in the market. And really making sure that we get new projects being built, complementing that with supply chain investment, which is strategic in its nature, focuses on Britain's industrial sweet spots, and then has a clear pathway to work through the project investment that we're doing. So, I think you have to do both of these things, and in fact, in many respects, our policy, our country has been very good at bringing forward projects, but not necessarily doing the sort of the industrial policy alongside it. And I think that's one of the areas where we're keen to differentiate through our Energy Engineered in the UK strategy, is very much about ensuring that we have that complementarity.
Kirsteen Sullivan.
GB Energy's mission includes both accelerating clean energy deployment and reducing bills for consumers. How realistic is it that you can achieve both those objectives simultaneously?
Well, I think in terms of driving down bills and driving deployment, I think there's the important one of the really good areas where we can do this is in the whole area of local and community energy. So, as I said earlier, the economics of solar in particular are very, very compelling. And the example I gave of a hospital saving £1 million a year, the question is how do we get more of that? And one of the obstacles to it being scaled beyond what has already been done is really availability of capital and focus and capability. So, a hospital would rightly look at investment in core technology, MRI scanners, in resourcing, all of these things as a priority. And us as GB Energy will see our core role as deploying the clean energy, but the outcome of that investment is the most important thing. And if that outcome is we can save operational costs for a school, a hospital, for a leisure centre, that then turns into a better community outcome, better healthcare outcome, a better educational outcome. That's the real power of driving the investment. So it's not just about megawatts. It's about the consequential outcomes that we try to drive.
Well, I completely appreciate the initiatives around hospitals, schools, leisure centres even as being very energy intensive, particularly with their swimming pools. But what about for consumers, the domestic user? How will bills be brought down for good, because that is a commitment in the mission?
Well, I mean, reducing bills, I think, is a national endeavour. We you know, I think from a technology perspective, a unit of electricity from a wind turbine or a gas turbine or a steam turbine is more or less the same, whether it comes from the UK or whether that's installed in the UK or it's in Germany or in Poland. Right? You know, the technology broadly the same. There are differences, and there will be, you know, slight local factors, but overall the technologies are, and the mix of technologies is not really necessarily the core driver of the cost. The thing that the aspects that are driving the cost are wider. So you need to look at how we pay for networks, how we pay for wider initiatives within the industry and policies and market design questions. So one actor like GB Energy cannot sort of solve a problem. What we can do is make sure that our investments are complementary to the mission. So, as I said earlier, if we invest in local and community energy projects, there is a direct benefit to those local communities. But one of the indirect benefits, which is less talked about, is that by building more production of energy close to consumption, we can reduce the amount of future investment that's required into our networks and our network reinforcement. And that will then have a benefit that is knocked on to consumers in the long run. The other example is, you know, I talked about unlocking the energy value of public land, and again, in those examples, making sure that what you invest in the, you know, on that public land is complementary to the needs of the network, and as the network develops, and that can help lower the cost of operating the network and the whole system and that will flow through to energy bill savings.
Well, the government has said that it aims to cut energy bills by up to £300 by 2030. Are you confident that can be delivered?
As I say, look, you know, it's a much wider programme. Big parts of that are down to government policy, wider government policy, and I'm not, you know, it's not for me to comment on. What I can say is that GB Energy's activities will work to have an impact in the areas that I've already outlined.
Thank you.